And we're live. Thanks everybody for joining me tonight, as usual. So tonight we're going to talk about immigration statistics newly released in Ireland, and I want to get into some of the proportions. Let's say I want to break down what the numbers mean and the scale of it, and sort of give some examples of the proportion. Try and paint a picture to show you how just drastic the situation kind of is in Ireland, and we'll take it from there. But yeah, so anyway, welcome all as usual. So just a few bits of housekeeping. Obviously, you can subscribe on YouTube, you can support the channel, you can super chat tonight if you like. All of that links are in the description and in the bio on Twitter or X if you're watching there. Also, I am working on a new laptop, so that's happening. I've got a few supporters who are going to help me out with it as well, because it's a bit of a, we call it a work cost. Give me a sound check there, lads, if you want to as well. Keep me posted. But so yeah, I've got a few people helping me out to get a laptop because I've been using a Chromebook, which is useless. I didn't realize that, but it's not really great. So I'll replace that. So I'm just trying to figure out whether to get 16 gig RAM or 8 gig. I don't really know any of that stuff. So I have some decisions to make on. Basically, I just don't want to get another one that is almost works well, but kind of just about doesn't. So some people tell me 8 gigs will do grand, and I'm like, should I not just get whatever would be grand and then some to be safe or not? It's one of those things. Anyway, so I'll get a laptop and there'll be no more freezing. I can have 15. Armchair Limerick Nationalist says as much RAM as possible. Indeed, as much RAM as possible, but of course as cheap as possible then as well. So it's a trade-off. I just want to strike a balance there. But because all I wanted to do is open some tabs for me, like a sort of a good healthy amount of tabs, be able to play videos fluidly and not freeze up. But I don't need any more than that. So anyway, that's that. Just one more bit of housekeeping as well before I get into numbers and the material, immigration, all that. Is I was thinking of anyone in the audience, anyone who wants to contact me who is decent with thumbnails. If I could get one decent thumbnail done, could be my face in it with a background, whatever. It doesn't have to be great. But if I could just get a thumbnail going, these streams would happen earlier and quicker, because I find when I'm trying to get stuff together in the evening for streams, I'll often be looking around like ridiculously looking for some shite photo or something to include as a thumbnail. Every night it's another, like, what, it's just such an annoyance. So I just want to have one thumbnail and then just title the show uniquely per night, but not have to do that. So just anyone who's into that kind of thing, I could use that. Anyway, with all that said, let's get into some of the stuff, some of the figures. It's madness what's going on. What's happening here now? Oh yeah. Just fix this. There we go. So these numbers came out from the CSO a few days ago, and I want to sort of clear up as well how I'm going to define the numbers. Some people don't like this, but I'm going to do it anyway, which is, it's not about making up statistics or making up numbers, but it's also not about just taking CSO numbers at face value. Sorry, I have to sneeze. Almost. It's not about just making up numbers. I wouldn't give numbers that I don't think are real, but it's basically taking the CSO numbers and sort of filtering them for reality. I've said this before, but there are lots of reasons why it's an undercount. Obviously, you have people coming into the country with no documents. You have people coming in from the north of Ireland across the border willy-nilly. Famously, well, not famously, but if you're into my sort of world, you have lots of cases where the CSO will estimate, let's just say there's 50,000 Georgians in Ireland, but then the Georgian embassy will state that there are like 100,000 Georgians in Ireland, and obviously they would be in a better position to know. There are many examples of this. Late stage Ireland on Telegram has documented that very well, be it Georgians or Bangladeshis or whatever. There's often a discrepancy between the numbers and the country of origin's numbers, who they would be in more of a position to know their number is always way higher. And again, you come back to the basic piece of logic as well, that in a situation where you have rampant sort of uncontrolled immigration, where it's all over the place and it's completely irregular, a lot of it is irregular, and there's people coming in and out, there's family reunifications going on, all sorts of stuff. In a scenario like that, where it is very loosely patrolled, then the CSO numbers are either precisely accurate, they are either a significant undercount, or they are a significant overcount. Now, logic would dictate with all that, that of course, of all those three possibilities, the exceedingly most likely one is that it's a significant undercount. Naturally, they're not going to count necessarily tons of immigrants who don't exist, but they might not count plenty who do exist for the reasons I've described. So I just see Vaughn Malone there in the chat says double the figures. Yeah, again, you could pull this out of your hat. You could do a lot of back of the envelope and sort of, there's a guy on Twitter, I think he calls himself Irish Statistics. He does very detailed breakdowns with the limited information that's there, official information, state information, and tries to break down different cuts and all that to try and figure it all out. The point I'm making tonight is that I'm basically not going into it in obsessive detail, trying to find a correct number where one doesn't really exist by extrapolating a million different things and trying to bring it all together and prove it all here, and none of that. I do that on my own time, kind of casually. But I'm also not just going to give you the CSO number and just say that's that, because it obviously isn't. So we'll sort of go somewhere in the middle there. Excuse me for sniffling. I'm just it's biology there, just doing its thing. But so what you have here for April, and I don't want to go into PowerPoint mode here, but I'll just quickly tell you. So the key findings in this recent data is that in the 12 months up to April 24, the population of Ireland rose by 99,000 people. And it's the largest 12-month increase since 2008. There were 149,200 immigrants, which was a 17-year high. This is the third successive 12-month period where over 100,000 people immigrated to Ireland. So 149,000 people is what they're saying, right? So the thing is that this is the highest number since 2007, they said, right? It's certainly higher than last year. It's an incremental uptick. It was very high last year, very high the previous year, but it's an incremental uptick. But it suffice to say, it's higher than last year. It's higher than the year before by a little bit, right? Now, what I come back to here is, for one, there's the common sense evaluation that, of course, it's an undercount. It's just only a question of how much. Then you go back to 2022, and you have Dan O'Brien, who is probably the premier regime court economist in Ireland. Does sort of he's like a state, he advocates state policies, generally speaking, with a few notable exceptions. But he's sort of like a state economist type of figure, in my view. And he said that in 2022, 250,000 foreign nationals came in 2022. Now, it's vague, and I've asked him on Twitter. He ignores me because I'm supposedly far right or whatever, right? But I've asked him to break it down. I think he got it from Eurostat. I couldn't find the Eurostat figures. In this gripped headline, it says 250,000 foreign nationals came in 2022. But then it goes on to say that in 2022, the foreign population of Ireland rose by 250,000. So is it that 250,000 came in, or did the foreign population rise by that much? Which are, of course, two different things: net versus inward versus net, let's say, right? So I don't know exactly where he got this from, but no other of his contemporaries, regime court economists, came out and sort of lambasted him for it or said it wasn't true. And they would love to have done that. They would have loved to have said, whoa, Dan's gone off the reservation here. Those numbers are totally off the wall. Nobody did that. Nobody in the mainstream challenged him. It sounds intuitively true. The other confusing factor, of course, is Ukrainian. So depending on which CSO or which Irish Times article or whatever you go to, in some cases it will appear as though when they talk about the immigration population or the foreigner population in a given year, that it will include asylum seekers, or it won't include asylum seekers, or it will include the lots of Ukrainians who came in the last few years, or it won't. And in some cases, the asylum seekers are sort of noted differently to the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians aren't asylum seekers. Are they international protection applicants? Are they counted as the same thing? Blah, blah, blah. It's fraught, right? It's fraught. You could spend all day banging your head off a wall. It's difficult. But he had this figure of 250,000 overall. He's talking about foreign nationals. So that would imply you're not breaking it down by asylum seeker or Ukrainian or Indian visa, or it's just foreigners who it seems here he says the population rose by 250,000. Now, in that year, you would have had similarly the CSO coming out and saying, I don't have it to hand, but in the same way as they said there were 149,000 immigrants this last year gone. For 2022, if you look it up, they'll say there were like 130,000 or something like that. Now, that doesn't square up with Dan O'Brien's estimate of 250,000. They sort of almost estimate it to be like half that. So you don't know what they're including or not. But one thing we do know is that it's common sense would dictate that it's an undercount. It's only a question of how much. So I could say that based on 2022, the discrepancy between the CSO and what maybe Dan O'Brien would say, or what we would assume just from common sense, that there's a 100,000 person gap. You know, if it's 149,000 now, and it was a little bit less in 2022, but it really was more like 250 according to Dan O'Brien, I could say, yeah, do you know what? It probably, this 149,000 figure for 2024 is probably 250,000. I could do that. It's a bit of back of the envelope. It's a bit of making a little jump, but I could just say, well, yeah, we're going with Dan O'Brien's number. We know there's an undercount. We know it's totally out of control. As someone in the chat just said there a while ago, you could double it. Yeah, you could double that. You could say it's 300,000. Again, you wouldn't have evidence for that. But of course, the CSO isn't evidence either, because it's far from an exact science. So it's just, in a way, are CSO gospel or are they not? Are my assumptions gospel? Are they not? Of course they're not. Is Dan O'Brien right on 250,000 in 2022? And can we just extrapolate from there and say, well, yeah, nothing huge changed between 23 and 24. In fact, the official numbers only went up. So can we just go with 250,000 as a baseline figure for these past 3 years, including this year, at least baseline? What I'm saying for that is basically to, and I think this is actually conservative, to say, let's call it 200,000, right? 149,000 came in officially, according to the CSO. 30,000 were returning Irish citizens. Now, of course, about half of those were probably foreigners who are just citizens who go back and forth. Again, where's my evidence for that? There is no evidence for that. There's no contrary evidence for that. We don't really have access to that, right? There's no breakdown by ethnicity. So someone could have been handed a passport in Ireland and they are what a lot of people would consider not Irish, not ethnically Irish by national ancestral origin. So again, that information just doesn't exist. So you could say I'm wrong, but then there's no contrary correct information to replace it. So we are just using our common sense a little bit, right? But again, I would never try to feed you information that I think is an exaggeration because it's suitable to my argument. I genuinely would not do that. And I don't need to. Numbers are high enough anyway as it is. But so yeah, if you take the 149,000 overall number and then 30,000 were returning Irish citizens, and let's say half of them are kind of foreigners anyway, so you end up at about 130,000, the CSO are saying, it's not much of a leap to go, yeah, that 130,000 could easily be towards the 200,000 number. It could be higher. If you go by Dan O'Brien's 2022 figure, maybe I'm grossly underestimating it. Maybe it's actually significantly higher. Or it could be 10,000 lower. Who knows? That's why I strike the balance and I say 200,000 sounds to me like a fairly round, healthy, conservative, and yet potentially accurate number for the immigrants coming to Ireland. So I hope I'm not kind of dancing around that too much, but I wish I could blow my nose. Anyway, so 200,000 a year. I'm just going with that. From here on in, that's how I'm going to talk about it. Now, we have as well the emigration numbers. So I want to get to them as well. So over 69,000 people departed the state in the 12 months to April 2024 compared to 64,000 in the same period of 2023. As I saw last Trugale noted in the chat a while ago, 10,000 Irish immigrants to Australia alone. Now, of course, again, you don't have a breakdown for immigrants of who's emigrating. You can go by citizenship, but a lot of the people who are citizens in Ireland are sort of what you would consider foreigners, foreign nationals, foreign origin anyway, and we don't know how to delineate. But again, we use our common sense. We live in this country. We know the social dynamics. We know what we see around us. And of course, if 10,000 Irish people are emigrating to Australia, it's not a African with an Irish passport who emigrated to Australia. We all know that's just ordinary secondary school Irish lads or leaving college or whatever who go to Australia. We all know that as a phenomenon. Basically, actual Irish people are the ones who go to Australia. So that's 10,000, but there's more, of course. So 69, so nearly 70,000 people left. And they go into detail on who that is. So immigrants were, out of the 69,000, 35,000 were Irish citizens, and some of the rest were others, UK, EU, Ukrainian, whatever. But point being, like, long story short, the great bulk of immigrants in Ireland are Irish lads and lasses, and the great bulk of immigrants are non-Irish. So some of the immigrants are Irish, they're returning Irish, but it's a small minority. And then if you go for immigration, it's the majority are Irish. So basically, as you bring in lots and lots of immigrants, the majority of them are not Irish. So basically, it's largely non-Irish coming in, largely Irish leaving. You see where the dynamic of that goes. But I'm going to find some more stuff here that piqued my interest. So you have, and feel free to contribute in the chat as well. I'll keep an eye on it and talk back and forth to you. You can super chat as well, of course, if you want. But so, I mean, there was a lot of stuff here. It's kind of hard to pick it out. So here we have rest of the world immigrants are the biggest number. So you've tons of Indians and stuff coming in at the moment. That's the big new thing. Just ask Barry Stanton. Indians, a lot of Indians are out. The origin and destination of migrants to Australia. So yeah, it's kind of, I almost feel like I can't pick through this. Oh, the age stuff. I found the age stuff interesting, right? So of course, over 1/3 of immigrants are age 15 to 24. So if we look at immigrants, so there's a heck of immigrants are in the 25 to 44 years age group, and immigrants are all between the ages of 15 and 44, probably closer to 20 and 40, somewhere between there. 20 and 30 probably is the biggest demographic. So we're pissing out our young people, obviously. I mean, this is all obvious in a way. Yeah, I could kind of leave a lot of that. There's more interesting stuff I kind of have for you. Anyway, you can find that. Don't go to the Irish Times or any of that. Just go straight to CSO and read their stuff. You can find that easily. But I did some paperwork, numbers work based on the 200,000 number. I hope I've sort of justified that number. Now, 200,000 in 1 year, and of course we'll say 200. Oh, here's another conservative thing I'm doing. I'm going to say 200,000 for all the last 3 years. So it could have been higher for all of them. It could have been somewhere there, but or it could have been larger in 2022 for some, according to Dan O'Brien. But I'll split the difference and say 200,000 every year for the last 3 years. That's 600,000 people. So I just want to give you an idea of how many people that is, and you can come back to me. You can just do the maths on this yourself if you really want to. But I had it here. I hope I don't embarrass myself with this stuff. So feel free to all fact check and correct me if you want to. But that it was that counts as one immigrant every 2.6 minutes. Now I hope I calculated that the right way. Maybe if you've got your phone calculator out, figure it out for me. So basically 200,000 immigrants a year. Figure it out, right? So how many minutes in a year, break it down. I think it's 2.6. Every 2.6 minutes, another migrant. And then if you break that down per household size in Ireland, so I looked up the average household size in Ireland, and apparently it's 2.75 people now per household, right? So using that number, plugging it into how many immigrants come every minute, basically multiply it by 2.75, is that if you break down the amount of migrants that come versus like the divvy them up into units of 2.5 as a household, then you would need to build a new house or source a new house for just immigrants alone in Ireland on every 7 minutes. Yeah. So again, feel free to correct. Every 7 minutes, you would need a new house just for immigrants. Now, here's one just to let you know. So this is according to Social Justice Ireland in 2022. It's a few years old now. That I don't know how they estimate this, but that the underlying shortage ranges from 212 to 256,000 in Ireland based on 2022 census figures. That represents pent up demand before considering future population growth or inward migration. So before you even consider extra houses that are needed, before you even consider this every 7 minutes job I'm talking about here, you would need, if you froze the population now, this very minute, just press the button and froze it, not a single other new person gets added to the country, you would need to build effectively 250,000 houses, maybe 300,000 odd, just to sort of alleviate the shortages, just so you could be at a market which sort of makes sense. Now, of course, those aren't getting built. They build like, there's like, I don't know, what is it, 30,000 built in Ireland, and they boast about, or they promise, they make false promises that, no, we'll build 60,000, we swear. Well, even if you did that, you'd be a long time getting to your 300,000 houses, and that's just pent up demand. And that's before you consider the fact that we have so many immigrants coming in that once ignoring the pent up demand, you would need a new house every 7 minutes just to cater for the immigration in Ireland. Now, houses don't go up that fast, right? I hate to break it to you. But another way of looking at the 600, I'm trying to check here if someone's correct. Maybe I was wrong. Nobody's nobody's correcting me yet. I mean, it's pretty quick calculation. It's pretty straightforward, but I know. So here's another way of looking at 600,000 I just felt was relevant. Now, again, this is all up for correction. I just went with sources online that the population of Cork is 300,000. Now, I always grew up hearing that it was 200,000. Sometimes you'll see it's 154,000 or something like that. Again, depends where you look, because sometimes they're measuring the city proper, or which could go out to who knows where the boundary is for different definitions of the city. But I found this thing, the Cork metropolitan area, where they expanded the city bounds out sort of more broadly. I think it might have been about 10 years ago they did that. So from what I understand, the Cork metro area has a population of 300,000, and that metro area, as it says here, it's loosely defined but taken by authorities to include the city of Cork, its suburbs, and the towns of Ballincollig. If you're familiar with Cork, this will be relevant to you, right? And includes the towns of Ballincollig, Blarney, Carrigaline, Carrigtwohill, Cove, Douglas, Glanmire, Glounthaune, Middleton, Passage West, and Ringaskiddy. So I pulled open the map of Cork, this Cork metro region, and had a look at it earlier. And I saw that it goes from like the northeast, like a little bit further than Glanmire area. Then it goes down to the southwest, furthermost corner of, let's say, Rochestown. And that's southeast, I think. Yeah. So, and then southwest, it would go out to Ovens. And northwest, it goes out just beyond Tower and Blarney, somewhere there, right? Now, this sticks out to me, especially because I'm from Cork, born, raised, bred, all that, Cork. And and for the most part, Cork City. So I know it well, right? And they've estimated the population of there to be about 300,000. So I'm just trying to give you the idea of numbers in just the last 3 years. The reason I picked the last 3 years, of course, is because the numbers have been very high, yeah, but also, the nature of things have changed. Everybody knows, whether it's the asylum industry building these plantation centers or visas just being handed out, everyone knows that since COVID lifted, so a bomb went off in Ireland. Some sort of policy shift, some sort of wheels flying off the car. It just went into absolute overdrive. I've been talking about immigration, the asylum industry, population replacement, the whole lot. I've been talking about it publicly, openly since 2016, right? I did the asylum industry thing in 2018. I've been talking about it for years, and I considered it, you can find it, me talking about it like it's out of control and it's crazy back then. And it was. But it just reached a new gear. Your car has 5 gears, suddenly it went into 12th gear. Where did that come from, right? That's what happened in 21 to 22, somewhere there. And I think every Irish person, whether they're sort of talking about it or not, sees that. Like, everything just changed, like a nuke going off, right? Just a complete upheaval And we see it in the prices of housing, prices of everything, uh, the texture of life out on the streets, how many foreigners you see around the place, the plantation centres, the Clonmel one, the Thornton Hall, all this going on, right? We all know that. So I'm using this era. This is the current era of rampant population replacement the last 3 years. And what we can surmise is that it's been about 600,000 people. Before I get back into Cork here, I'll just state the obvious. 600,000 people is about over 10% of the population of the country, right, in 3 years. Now, of course, if someone wants to, official economists might use the lower numbers, but we all know they're not real. I think 200,000 is much more close to the truth, to be honest, obviously. 600,000, that's my figure. Yeah, 10% of the population in 3 years. Now, the other thing to bear in mind is that we talk about the housing crisis now, but in 2019, everybody was talking about the housing crisis. 2018, everybody was talking about that term, that phenomenon was well understood and was the talk of the town, talk of the country in Ireland, the housing crisis. Rents, house prices, everything's out of control. People are having to stay at home, all that. That was all the case before this new bomb came on the scene. I should maybe stop saying that word. But speaking about immigration as a bomb set off in the country, proverbially, let's say, right? Metaphorical, the population bomb. So that's before all of that. So it's just on top of that, on top of an immigration and a population and a housing crisis, that like those things existed before this. This is on top of all of that. So you then add on 600,000 people on top of that, over 10% of the population on top of that. Now, there are many other ways I could break it down, but I want to go back into Cork for now, just for the crack. So you have this Cork metro area, which is the broad Cork area, right? And again, this just blew my mind to think about a while ago. And if you're familiar with Cork, you'll get it. But whatever, do this for your own city or town, you figure it out. But that's the huge Cork area, and it's 300,000 people apparently, recent-ish numbers. Now, if you got in your car, right, you make yourself a cup of tea, put it in your flask, and throw on some like night call or something. You know, go out in the car. You're sitting down. You're going to drive the city for a while, right? You know, sometimes you just do that. You're going to just drive around, in the evening or whatever, in the nighttime when it's quiet, and you're just going to soak up the city, go in and out of different places, or just drive around. You know, Cork's good for that because of the north side and the hills, and there's a lot to see, right? Now, and I've done that frequently. I like going for a drive when I'm in Cork, right? Around the place. Now, with that metro area, I was doing the Google Maps and like trying to figure out how long it would take. But if you went from that northeast tip of northeast Glanmire and you set off so you did a cross section of the whole thing, basically you covered the whole area. You covered this metro area. You go from Glanmire down to Ovens, and then you drive up to Tower, and then you drive back down to Rochestown, and then you drive from Rochestown back over to Ovens. You basically do a loop and an X, right? So you've kind of gone through it all and around it all. You've sort of seen every corner and been through the middle in both directions. That's what I would call seeing the whole thing, right? That would probably take you an hour and a half, right? And driving. It would take you ages. Cork isn't as big as Dublin, but it's a large place when you consider that metro area. And all you see for all that time, some of it is fields on the outer edges, but for the most part, in the city, it's dense, very dense. And then you get out to the suburbs, Bishopstown, Douglas, Blackpool, Mahon, dense, right? Just estate after estate after estate, Balapan, all that. And then you get out to the likes of Ballincollig, Carrigaline, which are huge satellite places that have almost conjoined into the city, and it's just estate after estate after estate. And then everywhere in between these places, the kind of quieter roads, it's just houses along all the roads, you know. And then even by the time you get out to the countryside edges of this metro area, you have got, I mean, I'm explaining like spatial, whatever, how cities work, but like, you know, you get to even when you get out to the Glanmire and Tower and all that, it's there's still the town centre, and then you drive up and down even the country roads, and there's houses littered up and down the roads. Like, you're still in the built up part of the inner countryside, if you know what I mean. So like, if you went out and you drove that with someone, and you just sort of for that entire drive, you just maintained an awareness of how many people am I seeing here? How many houses? How many cars? How many apartment blocks? Big apartment blocks? Just endless. Cork's not a tiny place, right? You know, it's a lot of people within that area. Like I say, all the cars, all the offices, all the apartment blocks, all the people walking up and down the street for hours, basically, of driving around this place, right? Now, what you have is two of those in 3 years came to Ireland on top of a housing crisis, a healthcare crisis, an overpopulation crisis, basically, or a resource scarcity crisis. You brought in two of those Cork cities, and I'm not talking about walking up and down Patrick Street. I'm not talking about going up and down in between the two rivers, right? I'm talking about Cork, the whole thing, like not the county, but the whole, like what the broadest version of what you could consider Cork City. Again, I'm saying Glanmire through town, out to Ovens, over to Rochestown, back through town, all the way out to Tower. Everyone who was inside that space, multiplied by two in 3 years, were brought into this country. That's insane, right? Another way of thinking about it, if you want to just get visceral sort of crowd numbers, is like how many is it? 7.2 capacity Croke Park concerts, right? So if you're ever up in Dublin when there's a Croke Park thing on, it sort of shuts down the city a little bit. All you'll see around the whole city is flooded. You have ordinary city people doing their shopping or going out for a drink or whatever, but the whole city, or at least a huge portion of the inner city, becomes, if it's a Taylor Swift thing or whatever, it's just all Taylor Swift people, or if it's the AC/DC, the same. Like, it's very obvious. You're in the city and you're thinking this place has just been swamped with this huge crowd, right? Like Twickenham or whatever in London, same story, maybe. But you're talking 7.2 of those, 7 of those. Now, like, bear in mind, before these 600,000 people came in, we had a housing crisis. Imagine if you lined up all of those 7 Croke Parks and you said, do you know, here's what our government thought was a good idea. All of these people now need houses. Bear in mind. Another question to answer, just while I'm kind of going with it, is that I'm trying to see if people are correcting my numbers. I mean, I just did like 45 minutes before I went live, just a quick, brainstorm on it. So maybe I could miss a trick or whatever easily. But open to correction. So that's 7 Croke Parks worth of people, or 2 Cork metro areas worth of people. Like, bear in mind, they came into a country that already had a declared housing crisis, where people couldn't find housing, they're leaving the country, they're stuck, they're desperate, they're going on the streets, everything. And you go, how can that work? So all they can do is build like 30,000 houses a year, which wouldn't even cater to the pent-up demand, which I spoke about a while ago. You'd be a long, long, long time, even if the population was frozen, clearing through that. You'd be like 10 years or whatever. And that's if you had double the capacity that the country is currently doing, and the country is basically at capacity. Bear in mind, if you try to get a wall knocked out in your house, or some work done, or whatever it is, it's almost impossible to get anyone. You could have lots of money and you just can't get people. I mean, that's the definition of, the state or whatever can't just kind of magically say, we're going to build 2 or 3 times as many houses. You can't. They're currently, you just can't get it. You couldn't get a plumber, you couldn't get anything. All the tradies, all the lads, they're all on sites all over the place, largely building these plantation centres and houses for Indians or whatever. But it is at capacity regardless, just resource wise, right? There's only so many men, there's only so many blocks, bricks, diggers, whatever, and they're all stretched to the last. So you can't go much further with this. And even with the population frozen, you'd be decades, with the best policy, most efficient policy in the world, decades undoing the tension already built up within the market, right? And then on top of that, you add these 2 Cork cities. Now, what happens when those people get added in? You think, well, how can a bunch of Indians and a bunch of asylum seekers and Chinese and Africans and Ukrainians and whatever, how can they all come into the country? Because they all come in and get a house, of course. Very few of them would come in and just be like standing on the street saying, I'm homeless now, I'll just remain on the street, cool. They don't do that. They would obviously sooner go home than kind of do that. So they come into the country, either they're wealthy Indians working in tech, or they're Ukrainians who are given a modular home, or they're put into an asylum plantation center, or they have enough money to rent, or they have like little ethnic rackets between them where they give each other housing, stuff like that, right? But by definition, they're sort of coming here for a house. Like, there will be housing for them, and they're at age that requires housing. So you kind of go, given that the system is sort of boxed in on every end, how can the population have just come in like that in the last 3 years? How can that be possible? Because there was a housing crisis already. So what did they do? Do we have 600,000 new homeless people now? Where was the how was their squeeze? How was a squeeze done to? How did these people squeeze in? Like, how did that happen? And how that happened? And I've talked about this many times, but you have to think about it in this manner: is that all those Irish people who are now living in their mum and dad's bedroom, the box room that they grew up in, right, with their, Manchester United blanket and all that. Like, they so many of Irish people went back into the house like that. So many people left for Australia or whatever, right? That's how you squared the circle. That's how it was freed up. So it was effectively all those Irish people were pushed back into their home house. They were pushed out of the country. Some were pushed into homelessness. Some were sleeping in their cars. Some were working people, right, who sleep in their cars. So, like, that's how the room was created. You have to remember that, like, you don't bring in 600,000 people to a system that's already not just failing to keep its head above water, but already deep underwater. You don't bring in 600,000 people and sort of magic them into magic new apartments. There weren't that many apartments or houses built, far from it. So something had to give, right? It's Irish people were basically demoted into desperate penury, homelessness, hidden homelessness, as they call it, sleeping in a car, sleeping in your friend's couch in an apartment, the rest of it. They were totally dispossessed, right, by that. But I'll try to find some other ways to look at it, right? So what have I got here? So I have, this is just a rough calculation based on the stuff I showed you a while ago, that 85% of immigrants are aged 0 to 44. So the thing is, when you're looking at the population replacement aspect of it, I've argued before that boomers are in another planet, right? Parallel society, where they are basically living in 1994 or whatever, right? They're in their world. They're not completely detached from the shared world we have, but in their demographic, in their friend groups, in their pubs that they go to, and their hotels where they go and get scones, and their private health insurance, hospitals and all that. It's just something as well I have to mention. And well, I'll finish my point. Is that it's a parallel society, and for them, their demographics in their social circles, their family and their brothers and sisters and all that, and where they go and what they do, it's still 1995 or whatever, right? Because their demographics are largely unaffected. That also increases the burden. So if you go, okay, so 600,000 foreigners came in on top of 600,000 foreigners came in on top of a population of, and there's so many ways you can break this down, lads, and it's worth doing. Sometimes people go on the blunt, big numbers, so you have to break it down and be specific. 600,000 people came in on top of a population of 5.3 million or whatever it is now officially for the Republic of Ireland, right? But it's not that, right? Because of that 5.3, probably 1.3, again, rough, give or take a few 100,000, whatever. But let's say 1.3, to round it off, are basically foreigners. They're foreign extraction, that they might have passports or might not. Some of them might semi-identify sort of Irish, but they're not Irish, legacy Indigenous Irish people, right? We all know what that is. So it's not 600,000 people on top of 5.3 million. It's 600,000 people on top of, let's say, 4 million, right? But then if you break down, and again, this is a little bit rough, you can fix it up if you want to and publish it yourself. I'm giving you the general idea. Then you take that 4 million and let's say half it. It's probably not exactly that, but let's just say half that and say, well, over the age of 44, you're getting into boomer territory. You're getting into the population there's not very many immigrants in their sort of world. And all the ones who came in, the vast majority of them aren't that age. So they've all been dumped in on that under 44 years old age demographic. So then you're breaking down that 4 million Irish people down to closer to 2 million, right? And then if you go, okay, well, let's say there's 2 million of those Irish people who would be contemporaries of the immigrants who came in. thus are sharing the same spaces, the same schools, resources, social environments to some extent. They're in the house buying market, whereas a 65-year-old isn't, etc., etc., right? So people are in sort of competition with the new population for scarce resources, etc., and have to share the same social environments and stuff like that. Whether it's a playground, whether it's a this or that or the other, where you take your kids or something like that. I'm trying to think of other examples. Just the city, like Dublin city. Oh, here's a good one: student accommodation, right? So they have to. That's a big issue as well. But that doesn't apply to a 65-year-old. So again, you break it down, 5.3 million becomes closer to 4 million when you exclude foreign extraction people. And then 4 million becomes closer to 2 million when you exclude the boomers, who are largely or far more unaffected by the whole thing for the reasons I've described. Then you're down to 2 million. And then you break, so you go, okay, so you have an effective population of 2 million in that age and ethnic demographic, national demographic. We had a population of 600,000 brought in on top of them. Now, what's the figure there, right? Somewhere between a third and a half, something like that. That's 3 years. That's not, the last 20 years, they brought 600,000 people in on top of 200 or 2 million. No, the last 3 years, right? Only that happened. And again, these are realistic numbers because, like I say, the 200,000 figure annually I'm using, it could be more. It genuinely could be. If anything bothers me, it's the fact that it could legitimately be more than that. I really don't know. It might be less, but it wouldn't be a whole lot less. So 200,000 is a really fair number. I'll just state that again. So you might have brought somewhere like 600,000 people in on top of a population of about effectively 2 million people who are Irish and under the age of 50 odd, right? Who are actually, like I say, competing for housing, competing for everything else, trying to raise kids, trying to go to college, all that. So that's pretty bad. I mean, need I say more? You could look at it so many other ways. The Irish statistics guy on Twitter pointed out that basically if you're an Irish person of about 20, you're going to be a minority in your age demographic within about 6 or 7 years. It's sort of there's a convoluted way of getting to that, but it seems right. But even if you take it as it is now, so let's take that working number of 2 million have had 600,000 people brought in on top of them in 3 years. Now, if that were to continue, how long more does it take? I don't want to embarrass myself with failing primary school maths here, but you have 600,000. So you would need, I don't know if this quite is an exact science. It's obviously far from it, but just for loosely speaking, you would have seven more installments of 200,000. So basically, in 7 years, the people under the age of Irish people under the age of about 44 or 50, which is like most of us, I suppose, or a lot of us, or maybe under 44. My point is that all it would take is another 7 years on those numbers, where it's we're a minority now, at that age, not the boomers, and at that point, of course, 10, 20 years or whatever, the boomers will be dead. And so it'll just be, there'll be no more boomers to sort of look enviously upon. It'll just be, we're just left in the shit now, right? It's just us now. We're the boomers, but now as boomers, we are 40% of the ethnic population or whatever. So not good. And point I want to make is that with these numbers, I mean, the resource crunch is shocking, obviously, right? It's Sean Mack there in the chat sort of helped me out a bit there. So 200 to 250,000, let's say 200,000 a year. Yeah, makes us a minority. Basically, it makes us a minority. To me, it makes us a minority currently. As in, if that keeps going another year or two, because you don't know the true numbers at play. So it could be 7 years, it could be 5, it could be 8. You don't know. There's no button goes off when it happens numerically. It just means that as we're going now, unless a handbrake gets pulled rapidly in the next year or two, and there is basically complete revolution, like some form of revolution, peaceful and legal, obviously, unless there's revolutionary scale of, and unless there's a revolutionary scale of change that's brought on by black swans or policy changes or, overthrow of government legally and peacefully, nothing to do with me and all that. But unless there is obscene levels of change that begin right now, then the minority question is over. Like, case closed, right? I hope I've made that point clear to you with the numbers. You again, in 3 years, you have Ireland, the Republic of Ireland's second largest city, their whole metro area, double the size of that in just in immigrants, on top of a housing crisis in 3 years. I mean, what else can I say? Um, and the minority thing is a bit of a red herring anyway to me, because like if you look at a lot of towns all over Ireland, man, big and small, largely small ones, but a lot of these towns and areas are minority already, so someone was saying there in Gort, I don't know how true it is, but I read in some chat there that like in Gort, like one of the biggest populations are Brazilians now, which is surreal to even think about, like bigger than Irish. I'm not sure how true that is, but there are many areas where the Irish are not the biggest population there. Listun Varna, for example, the biggest population of Listun Varna are Ukrainians, and Listun Varnonians, or whatever they call themselves, are a third of the population. So, for them, it's already happened. When is it going to happen? It happened there years ago. It happened other places years before that. It's happening to another town tomorrow, another town next week. So, it could be Dublin City is already that way. I think North Inner City, it could be, again, it's a gradual process, and it's a directional thing as opposed to a countdown or whatever, really. But anyway, it's happening rapidly, and it's bad. But and it's real as well. It's not just about like the resource crunch will be really, really, really bad, and also the social fallout, like the Bosniafication of Ireland, like this is going to be a very, very socially and unstable, we'll say. Like it's going to be a tinderbox, basically, clearly. And we're locked into it pretty much already, which is crazy. Like it's kind of like now is the time that something has to radically change one way or another, or else we're just in for the most grim, grinding dystopia you can imagine. I would say, if unless it changes in the next few years, then 15 years time is going to be brutal, right? Like economically, social unrest, the whole lot, right? So I don't know how it's going to go exactly, but in that sense. But what else did I have? So yeah, I just don't want to leave any of the number stuff on the table. Yeah, I think I talked about that. So I had one here. It was just just from Owen Linhan, posted this from the Irish Times on X. This is the funny thing, like yet another poll showing that Irish people are overwhelmingly concerned about. I won't read it. I'll just get to the point that what is getting voters' attention, key themes 2024, and 76% of people have negative comments about immigration. Sorry, 76% of people, more than three quarters, right, are against immigration. Basically, pissed off about what's happening. How could they not be? Have I not described it in enough detail yet? I didn't even get into the economic fallout, the state of the housing market. It's one of those things as well, by the way, right? I implore you, if you're watching this and you are a boomer, or you're not a boomer, but you have a house, you rent or you buy, you own your house outright, or you just own your house, you're comfortable, you're set in your house, it's grand. You haven't looked at the property market in a long time because it just hasn't occurred to you, right? That's how it is. I implore you, if you haven't, then go on Daft and put yourself at the age of 26. Give yourself an average salary in Ireland. Look up what the average salary is. Plonk yourself down in whatever part of the country you are in this VR exercise here, right? And grant yourself an average salary. No, grant yourself a bit more. Take the average salary and add 10,000 to it, right? And hypothetically, you're single or you're married. Maybe your wife has the same salary. Who knows? Now put that all together and try to figure out how you're going to rent or buy in Ireland. Oh, and you have zero deposit. You're going to have to save that. But in order to save for the deposit, you as well, for this hypothetical. In this hypothetical, you're renting currently a house where you are for €1,000 because you got a good deal, so called, from like 4 or 5 years ago. And now imagine your landlord is starting to make noises where potentially he might be trying to get rid of you. And you're thinking, I have zero deposit saved. My rent still costs a lot. Um, Basically, what I'm saying is figure your way out of that situation, hypothetically. Because what'll happen is you'll pull open daft.ie and you'll go, oh my God, I had no idea it's this bad, right? And there are people out there losing their minds with worry because they're unlike you, they're in the situation, they're in the shit, right? That's what you have to do, figure that out. But um, so I haven't even talked about like I talked about that other nights. I don't want to repeat myself. We all know how bad it is out there. We see now that it's like 600,000 people probably over 3 years, twice the size of the Cork metro area, 6 Croke Parks, well over 10% of the country, and probably somewhere between a half and a third of the immigrants' contemporary age Irish corresponding population, right? Obscene. And then you look at the views of Ireland, and the vast majority of people their number one issue is immigration. Second is housing, which is 76% for both housing and immigration. Though they're the same thing, obviously, right? That's why those numbers are the same. It's no surprise there. So those are the biggest issues. The situation is, by any metric, I could go to a random Mongolian goat farmer, right? And if I spoke Mongolian and I said, come here, do you want to know something? In Ireland, blah, 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 you brought this many people into the country and nobody can get a house. Nobody can find somewhere to rent. People are losing their minds with worry and all that. And people are stopping having kids now and everything. And we're going to become a minority, and and they're bringing in more and more people and nobody wants it. That Mongolian farmer would tell you, yeah, that's nuts, right? Obviously. An alien from Jupiter could tell you that, right? It's totally obvious. The fact that immigration is their biggest issue, despite how suppressed it is in the media and everything, it's still their biggest issue because you can't avoid it, is obvious. Of course it is. And the answer, of course, to 76% of people are against or think immigration is being handled badly and everything, right? They have negative views on immigration. The obvious answer to that from a state point of view would be to say, okay, let's just not do that. For 2025, it's not going to be very few immigrants. It'll be net negative. We'll start working on those 600,000 people we brought in the last 3 years. We'll sort of start showing them the door, basically, nudge them out. It's nothing cruel about that. It's just you just kind of restrict access to various dole and this and that, and you need a new license now to get a new place to rent. And that's what they do in China when they want to get people out, right? They don't have to drag people away. They just sort of stop renewing your access to things. And eventually you're just boxed out. You're like, oh yeah, I'll just go home. I can't really get a license for a new house. I can't renew my visa. I can't access banking because the bank want me to get this form from the government that they just introduced. And if you can't get the form, then you can't get the bank. You can't get, and you just go home, right? It's not a big deal. The government could say, yeah, we're going to start working on those like 600,000, which is not far off a million, probably a million if you consider the past 5, 6, 7, 8 years or whatever. We'll start working on them, and we'll send home so many of them that the few people who we do need to bring in, critical infrastructure, the rare, genuine marriage of someone who went abroad and got married and came back or whatever, for the few who we do bring in, which we'll drastically cut anyway, that few who will inevitably come in under any government in any society will be so drastically outweighed by the amount of people who we nudge out that net migration will be just like net minus 100 and something thousand every year, right? And watch the market crash, right? So the housing, all the people on the other side of housing, the gone beans and the profiteers and the banks will say, oh, the housing crisis, the prices have crashed. Oh no, it's a disaster. But of course, Irish people will be happy. An Irish 22-year-old will go, well, the jobs, like it's kind of rattled the whole system a little bit for sure. And it has created issues, but you can just grab a house now, right? Which would be pretty good. That would be the logical thing the government would do, is basically a complete reversal of the whole thing. They go, yeah, 76% of people are against it. A Mongolian farmer would tell you it's crazy. Everybody's against it. The policy is objectively nuts. Yeah, okay. We're meant to be in a democracy. This is a great political capital. We'll just follow up on our promises and do that. And it'll be lovely. But no, that's not what's happening. Simon Harris is talking like this to a bunch of boomers in Bale na Blah in Cork. I mean, I every show I like to watch a little bit of red meat, like, and just so anyway, enjoy. In a wide-ranging speech, Minister Simon Harris told all the boomers that gotta watch out for the far right.
In a wide-ranging speech, he dealt with the legacy of Michael Collins, Ireland's role in the world, and in particular the threat to democracy.
We unite in defiance of those who try to silence elected politicians, who try to thwart the will of the people.
The will of the people.
Violence, threat, or intimidation.
And he addressed the growth of the far right and said Ireland must stand together in defiance of the attempts to divide and distort.
This was my favorite boomer picture here. I want to actually print this out and get it done as like a portrait in my house or something like that. Like, just kind of, there's something I've paused this video multiple times on this exact cut. There's just something about it. It's the ultimate boomer. I'll just actually, Owen Linehan had a take. I'm all Owen Linehan tonight, but he had a take on this. He said there's a sadness about the scene. Grey heads living in a parallel world to their grandchildren, politely listening to the awkward transition year kid doing his Toastmaster speech. He's replacing them with asylum scammers who will be planted into their villages, or he keeps them oblivious. But yeah, I've talked about how boomers who just don't care and are completely ignorant and have no, like the sow that ate her farrow, no consideration. One kid's in Australia, the other is like, like depressed out of their head. The other is like freaking out because their kids are like, they're in a house and they're thinking they might actually be homeless even though they're working. They're like, oh shit, what am I going to do? And these lads are driving around in their 242 sage green, whooshing around in their 242 sage green electric cars. And they just don't care. They just do not care. No, not all. Don't freak out. Sometimes people in the chat freak out. I know boomers watch this. I'm not talking about you, obviously. But as a generality, that's what it's like. And these are the faces. These are the, no offense to these people personally, right? But the dead sort of material, these are the people who had masks on and had like grandchildren running around in bubbles and stuff like that, right? Being traumatized, having their childhood stolen away from them because they were afraid they might die. We're all going to die, okay? You're not going to live forever. The fact that you're a bought-off generation who got sold on divorce and liberalism and all this shit and material wealth, right? Holidays away and fancy this and that and whatever, right? We're modern now. We're not like our parents, these farmers or whatever. The fact that you got sold materialism so badly and spiritual and national interests and all these things were so hoovered out of your brain that now you're old, and because there's so little meaning, and the kids are in Australia and the rest of it, right? There's so little meaning that the only thing left to care about is not dying, right? This idea of permanent life, living forever, holding on desperately. I don't care if I have to lock my grandchild in a dungeon for years. If it keeps me going with my mask for this fake thing, right? Then it's worth it. I live in a grey room by myself, waving at my grandchildren, even though I'm like, 60 or 75 or whatever. It's like, you're going to die in the not too distant future anyway. I'm sorry to tell you, I won't be long after you. It is what it is, right? But so obsessed with just the basic fact of remaining alive, which of course we all want to do, but within reason. And so then bought into, of course, nobody, COVID was like, BS. I wouldn't mind if it was an actually real threat, but they were just sitting there watching RTE, completely unavailable to reality. And again, I know if I said any of this to these people in front of me here, right? If I said, listen, people can't get houses, they're losing their minds, they're not having kids, they don't have, like I always say, they don't have a house, nor to mind a tool shed with tools in it, or savings, or any of that. They are really primally affected by this, right? And if I said it's happening because you're bringing 600,000 people into the country, the government are doing that intentionally, right? It's not an accident. They're doing that intentionally, and we're going to become a minority and we'll be alienated from social spaces and all this kind of stuff. That's real. They would look at me with the greatest contempt. And that's what most boomers do. Even ones who almost might, they don't even disagree with you that much. They just think if you're complaining about it and you're sort of a little bit worked up about how bad it is. Like, I'm not talking about freaking out on someone, but I'm saying if you go to a boomer and you say, do you know what? It's really bad what's going on, you know? And to be honest, it makes me sick. The way the country's been ran, even if you've got to frame it in a normie way, the way this country's been ran, it's like nobody cares. And the government they're bringing in all these people. And then Irish people, of course, can't find it. You know, if you're saying it in a reasonable way, it's just crazy, you know, it's just crazy. People aren't going to be able to live, and you know, they put all these people in houses and it doesn't make sense, and la la la. If you just said that to a boomer, it's like that thing with women, you know, the whole thing of the ick, right? Like if you get beaten up in a fight, your like girlfriend will like be like permanently put off by you. It's like, I saw him being weak, or if you cry, or you know, that kind of thing, right? It's like when you complain a little bit, not even about yourself, but just in general, I find boomers get this ick. They look at you and they go, ugh. You know, it's like, sure, you all went to college. I only got an orange for Christmas, and this kind of shit, right? And they go, it's like they can't and they always refer back to some sort of hardship that they had. Well, it was sort of hard in the 80s. Well, when I was born in the 50s, we only got an orange, or la 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 la. And you kind of go, I know, but now you're really wealthy, and your kids are totally screwed, and the fact that they're screwed and these things that are being done that you're buying up, licking up from RTE, that's not mutually exclusive to the fact that you got an orange in 1962. I mean, both things can be true. You got an orange, it's fine. I actually think oranges are nice, but or like the fact that, yeah, you might have gotten an orange, but you had these communities where everyone would offer up a hand, you know, and there was this very peaceful environment that she kind of lived in, you know, and community thing where when people were trying to raise kids, there's relatives everywhere and there's this social harmony to some extent. We don't have that now. Again, they are completely uninterested and don't want to know. And they look at you in disgust if you complain about it. And you're just thinking, well, I'm not driving around, whooshing around in my 242 Sage Green electric car, right? But you are apparently. And that's of the utmost importance for a 69, 75-year-old to have some brand new car. Is that really necessary? Okay, fine. But they don't consider it's like they've no connection. Whereas to me, in my view, when I'm 70 and my kids now, who are, you know, infants, toddlers, like, I like to think that I'm 33 now, so let's say when they're my age, roughly, I'll be like 60, 65, somewhere there, right? I'll be a boomer when they're my age, right? And hopefully they'll be having kids of their own. I'd like to think that there will be nothing more important to me than the welfare of my kids and my grandkids. I won't say, you're raised now, you're out the door, you're 18. Sure, I only got an iPhone when I was a kid, and you know, or something like that, right? I won't be trying to make comparisons. And no, I just will want the maximum benefit for my kids and my grandkids, and not just them, but other Irish people's kids and grandkids too. Because of course you don't exist in a vacuum. I want them to have the best. And if they come to me and they're having a hard time, I'll be saying, it's provided I have a house and basic means and comfort for myself. Then if I have some sort of ostentatious excess and you're in any way deprived, I'm just going to transfer it. Like, it doesn't, to me, I'm like, you're me, you're my biological self, really. Like, you know, so, you know, and if they complained about the social environment, I'd just be all ears, like, provided they're not transgender lunatics or something, I'm not going to listen to that. But in terms of like, just economic and social complaints about what's going on or whatever, or any deprivation, I won't have them be deprived. I won't want them to be in a country like that, and I won't let them personally. I'll be looking after them. If they said, I'm going to have to go to Australia because it's just hard, I'd be like, listen, I'll take whatever assets I have and like try give as much over to you as I can for your house or whatever I can do. And if you need a break from your kids, I want to look after them. I want to be a third, fourth parent to these grandkids, you know. I'm 70 years old. What else? That's what could be ever more important in my life. Telly, a sage green whooshing around electric 242. Simon Harris doing a bill of law. No, nothing could be more important. And if I see them being dispossessed for Indians and Roma gypsies and the rest of it, right? I'm not having that. Like, and that's why I'm talking about this now. I'm not having that. And whereas if I brought any of that to them now, what about the fact that one of your kids is like basically working, totally working poor, and struggling to raise a kid, and the close, like they have to move like 100 miles from where they were raised or whatever. They were raised in Dublin, but they have to live in Athlone to afford a scally, shitty apartment surrounded by foreigners that they're renting, or something like that, right? That's not the case for all people, but it's very common. You know, one of your kids is in that position. One of your kids is in Australia, and you have got what is in effect ostentatious levels of comfort and wealth for kind of your age, like basically excess, like you sort of in excess abundance, and your kids are in a net deprivation. Doesn't that sound weird? Are they the ones raising kids? They're the ones in the prime. They're like, it's kind of weird, like, yeah, if you said that to any of them, they would look at you like you have got fucking leprosy, right? And that's the boomers standing there listening to this creep, weirdo, like repulsive thing speaking to them. And so about disinformation, right? Oh, people are the far right are raising ire against immigration in this country. Bruh, 76% of people, almost everyone's against it. Okay, so like the whole thing is just completely warped.
There are some who wave a tricolour, our flag, our tricolour, and claim patriotism while betraying every founding principle that this country stands for: freedom, equality, and opportunity. It's up to each of us, and especially those of us in leadership positions, to be the solution we seek. So please, call it out. Use your voice, and don't just whisper it. Call out racism. Call out hate. Call out ugliness every time you see it.
Oh my God. The idea of Harris speaking to a crowd like that. See that little shot of them at the end there. Oof, brutal. Brutal. Look at that for a crowd, right? Now, how many of them have got, I mean, some of them might be poor and cold and all that. I'm not being terribly ageist or whatever and all that, right? But a lot of them, even the sort of more wily looking lads, probably have like, tens of thousands buried somewhere down the field and all this kind of stuff, loads of money, like. Which again, I don't begrudge people of it, but it's that their own offspring are on the shit end of the stick then. And they're standing there listening to Simon Harris, and he talks about calling it out. Now, here's one for I just want to put I'll do a reverse like meta call out here. If you're someone who knows me personally, I've never really done this before actually. I always say that like in my personal life that because you never know how many people are sort of like aware. Oh, you make videos online, and the Irish Times called you far right and whatever, right? You do, you don't know who sort of knows the online part of me doing this or whatever, or who doesn't, kind of, you just don't know. And a lot of people would be too sort of, I don't know, maybe they agree, but they just want to keep their powder dry, or maybe they're neutral, but they just think it's kind of awkward and they don't want to broach it unless I announce, make a point of it or whatever. So, like, very rarely will someone sort of. What I'm saying basically is he's talking about calling it out, call out people who are against immigration and that. In a rare moment, I'm going to say for anyone who happens to know me personally, who thinks, oh yeah, I'm going to call it out. I would openly invite you to call it out totally to my face. No problem. I just want to answer Simon Harris's proclamation there. Feel to call it out. Say it. Don't say it loudly. Say it to people. Call it out when you hear it. Hey, please, anybody, call me out all you want, right? I am happy to engage peacefully and respectfully on the matter. In fact, I would love it because, let's be honest, rhetorically and as a point of fact and morally and everything else, I would as a figure of speech, shred that person, right? They don't have a leg to stand on. Like any boomer or anyone who would listen to that and think, oh yeah, these people are full of hate. By all means, talk to me about it. I'll happily talk at length to you about it. So as Simon Harris says, absolutely do call it out. Please call it out. Please, someone take me up on it. If you think I'm wrong on this, I don't care. If I see it in Tesco's, if you're polite and peaceful, right? I don't care who you are or what you are or how I know you, feel free, right? Because I totally stand over all of this. As do, I mean, everybody agrees with me, as according to the stats anyway. But yeah, so that's that. I mean, am I just going to come on live here every night and devolve into a screed against boomers? I don't know, maybe. So anyway, this is just to wrap it up. Sort of in conclusion, here's a look at the Plantation Centre in Clonmel. Sort of obtuse to everything else I was talking about. It's obviously related, but like it's kind of a hard segue. There's no real link between the previous topic directly to this. It's just something else I saw before I went live that I thought was remarkable. Here's the Plantation Centre in Clonmel. There you go. So bear in mind, I'll play the rest of it quietly, but bear in mind, most immigration in Ireland is not the asylum centre stuff. It's actually just people coming, Indians and others coming in on visas. A lot of them are legal migrants. So it's not about illegal versus illegal. It's not about asylum centre versus getting a house themselves on the market. It doesn't matter if some Indian wealthy buys a house on the market and they're totally non-criminal and all that. It doesn't matter. The sheer volume, houses are a scarce and limited resource. They can only go up so fast, right? So it's all the one. But this is just the most extreme element of it, I suppose. And yeah, I was there when this when the lads down in Clonmel kicked off about this and started doing protests. And I went down there one day. And there was a camp up here, and it was only before they even started building or anything really, or digging. And now they're at this. It's like, it looks like an airport or something they're building. But you know, think about how many people live in Clonmel, right? In old, either homeless, right? They don't have a house, or they live in old houses where the whole thing is totally not fit for purpose. It could be really renovated and that. Some granny in some really old house with her 10 jackets on and all that. So I'm not totally bad to boomers, right? But what I'm saying is, if people in Clonmel are either homeless and I'm not talking about delinquent homeless like druggies and stuff like that, no disrespect to them, that's a different problem, right? That's a social, spiritual problem and all that. But I mean homeless people who are like working, they have or hidden homeless, like they're working, like they have money, they don't have an addiction problem or anything, they're working, they just can't get somewhere to live. How many people like that are in Clonmel, and how many people are in old, not fit for purpose houses that could easily do with renovating, but of course you can't get, if you had water pouring out of your sink or whatever, and you had to get a plumber, it'd be hard to get someone. It's hard to get anyone to do anything, and not to mind renovations. A lot of people who are in the know, tradespeople and stuff, if you said, oh, could I get someone to totally renovate my house now if I had like the general cost of what they'd almost smirk at you and go, good luck, right? It's not even a question of money, you just can't get someone. And here they all are building this thing. Now, again, for the cost of this super plantation centre, I'll play the video so you can see all the diggers and the hardcore and rock going down and all that. Think of all the various water infrastructure and stuff that'll be going on here, and electrics and stuff. If the state was going to piss away, tens of millions, I don't know how much something like this costs, a lot of money. And money is only a indicator. It's just really the manpower and the machine power. All these trucks, diggers, site engineers, whatever, civil engineers, I don't know what you call them. The lads who know how to put all this stuff together, and various different people and materials involved, right? And then the financing to back it all up. If you took all this and said, all right, all of these lads on the site are now just basically given the tens and tens of millions that this costs and however much it'll cost to keep the migrants on it. And we're instead just going to put all that money into kind of loose effect. Basically, all of these tradespeople, like that thing where they do up a house on TV, they go to some granny's house and do it up very quickly. And it's like a TV show. I don't know what that's called. But like a town version of that, where all of these people, all this manpower and machinery and resources and money is all sort of just arrives on a bunch of trucks, like a huge convoy of trucks, endless convoy of trucks and rocks and material and stuff. And they just say, yeah, we're just here now for just the people of Clonmel. So basically, we'll come up with some rationing system, how to divvy this up. So, if you're a Clonmel person, ring us with your case, make your case. We'll come up with some fair way of adjudicating it. And we'll basically just start working through it. You're homeless? Cool. We'll build you a house here. Even on this site, we'll build you a house. You're someone who needs a couple of walls knocked and a bit of rewiring. Well, look, that'd be nothing compared to the site that's going on here. That's fine. We'll send an electrician down. He'll do it over the course of for 4 or 5 days, or a bunch of lads maybe to do it in that time or whatever. And we'll just start working our way through the town. The town is only so big, and it'll just be on a case by case, according to their needs sort of basis. We'll start doing it that way, and we'll just keep going until whatever the cost of this whole project sort of runs out, more or less, and we'll see what we could have gotten done. How many people in Clonmel could have been helped? People who are going to be cold this winter in their shitty old house that's got damp, or whatever, and they're looking at the damp going, okay, so I've got a big damp patch here, and if someone were to be called in to look at it, probably the guy would say, oh, well, you've kind of got it. It's a bit of a bigger problem. It's going to cost like 15, 20 grand or whatever to fix, because it means you're going to have to do this, that, and the other, and it escalates or whatever. And they just know, no, I'm just going to have to live in this like dungeon, basically. And if they go, I don't have that problem, luckily, but I have looked in, because I'm in a house of my own now. I do look into grants and this and that and what renovations cost and so. I'm interested in that now. And I see all these grants are bullshit. It's like, if you have the money to build it, you can get reimbursed a certain amount via grant, but you still have to have a lot put into it anyway and stuff. So in a lot of cases, people could be in that situation I'm talking about, and there's no grant. There's no, you could pick up the phone and ring counsellors and ring whoever and say, what am I supposed to do with this? And they just say, it's weird. They just say, and bear in mind, I'm not in this position. I'm not sympathizing for myself. I'm not at all. I was just curious, because I was like speculating into the future about stuff right now. But it still blew my mind to know that, okay, so if you're in a certain situation and you needed electric work done, or you had some big damp patch, or you had some big problem like that, and you just didn't happen to fall into these weird narrow grant categories, or you didn't have the upfront hundreds of thousands or whatever it might cost, tens of thousands to put into a thing in order to get 20% of it back or whatever. If you don't fall into any of these categories, let's say, and you just say, well, I have like a sparking, flaming electric socket or whatever, or I have a big, huge damp patch and I'm coughing and there's mold growing and, whatever. It is just a case where they just say, I don't know. You have to figure it out. And if you said, well, I'm going to bring you all of my bank statements, all of my resources, everything I can bring you, I'm going to show it to you. I'm going to ask you to figure out, based on my means, how I should figure that out, and how much debt I can potentially be given and stuff. And they could say, oh yeah, I see through your documents here, there is no way for you to figure it out. You cannot do it. And then you say, well, thus, what can you do for me? They say, computer says no, sorry, I don't know. Just go home and die, basically. That's what it would be like for a lot of those people. Whereas you could have all this site, all this work that's going on, all the men here with all their wonderful skills, right? And they're top of the range wiring and this and that and crush rock and whatever it is. They could have all that, and these Komatsus going 90 all day long, right? And the rest of it. That could all be going around Clonmel, finding all these people and saying, let's help you out, right? There's a young couple here there. I remember Phil Dwyer interviewed a couple in, I think it was Burr County Offaly. They were a beautiful young couple, right? I like, heartbreakingly nice. This young woman and man must have been 20 years old, I'd say, either of them, not much more anyway. And they had a baby 2 weeks ago or a month ago or something like that. There was a new beautiful little baby in the buggy. Phil was talking to them, They said that they're basically homeless. They're like living with family, but they're trying to move out. They're trying to find somewhere. And I know how scary that would be after you have a kid. Most people like to be married and the new house with the live, laugh, love on the wall and all that 3 years before they kind of have the kid. And so everything is totally sorted, all debts cleared, everything handy, right? That's the ideal. And that's the way it should be. Nature wants that of you, right? And your own nature wants that of you, man and woman. And yet these people have this kid, and I think they're so good. They're so nice. It was Shannon. I remember was her name. I can't remember his name. It's completely salted the earth, totally sound, probably really cool. But that's it. Could you not find their equivalent, who I'm sure exists in spades in Clonmel? A young man and young woman, 25 years old. They've committed to each other. They're doing the right thing. They're doing it right. They aren't gumbeans. Their parents aren't property developers. Their parents aren't Banty McEnany, who gives them funding money to go around the world on holidays, taking photos for Instagram or whatever. They're not that, and they're not in on the racket. But they're also not given a social house either. And they might not even qualify for one because they've got modest jobs. They actually want to work, or one of them wants to work, and they're just totally fucked. Totally. And I'm going, if I could just have the ability or the power somehow to be able to have the power to be able to say to all these lads on this site that you can see in front of you, lads, over here we have Shannon and whoever, right? I want you to get that digger. I want you to get a site, figure it out with the council what the right site is. I'm sure there's loads of potential ones around. Let's do a rapid. If you're able to barge in on this place without planning, basically, you can do it somewhere else for a small house. Go to a nice house. Start working on trees that'll be mature in 30, 40 years. I want their kids and their grandkids to grow up in a beautiful property. And I want it to be top of the range, as in like good quality, small, decent, modest, but safe and comfortable house for these kids. These are Irish children here being raised by two responsible parents. Get them in, right, to a house. But it's the opposite. They're made effectively homeless while they're able to, do magic for these. I mean, the way they moved in on this center is unreal. Where else have they done the same thing? I've seen many cases of it where it's like a military operation. Suddenly the state works with ruthless levels of efficiency, even where I'm impressed. I'm on a purely what's the word? Logistical sense. I'm impressed. But I'll very rarely be impressed by the state and what they're doing, obviously. But in this rare instance, you go, holy moly. Turns out they're able to. This is pretty good. This is like one of those videos you see where they repair a bridge or a canal in the Netherlands, where they do something very impressive in China or Japan, and we sit back and we marvel at how they're able to get things done ruthlessly effectively over there, and we can't because we're hapless or whatever, or we're run by a bunch of donkeys. Well, in this case, it looks like a video out of the Netherlands. It's all working harmoniously. It's getting done. Things are flying up. It's almost like a time-lapse video. They can do that for what? A bunch of Nigerian, 28-year-old Nigerian men coming to go ficky. Like, are you serious? Like, but they can't do that for an Irish couple or an old lady who's cold in her house with big damp patches on her wall and all this. They can't send all these diggers out. Breaks my heart. It makes me so angry. And then Simon Harris is talking about misinformation. Well, 76% of the population are against his immigration, or not his, the immigration policy that he is like talking about. I don't believe politicians have any power like that, so I don't want to do the simple Simon Leo the Leak, Mihal Shite Martin or whatever it is. What is it? Mihal Martin. These politicians are just actors, but they still represent the narrative. So, and then the boomers here doing their thing. I just wish how much I care, and I'm not trying to make a saint of myself. I'm far from it, right? But the fact that, like, what I don't get is I care deeply about, obviously, my own kids, and I will care deeply about my grandkids. When my grandkids are born, God willing, I will care about them as much as I care about my own kids right now. I will be deeply invested in how they are. And I don't want to upset. I know I talk about the 242 and the electric car. I'm not begrudging of people who have stuff and all that. I'm not. It's just an analogy, right? But like I say, I don't want my grandkids or my kids to be in a difficult situation while I have some abundance. I don't want that that sort of topsy-turvy situation, I would think, no. I need I want what I need, and I want you to have what you need as well. And if I have to make some sort of transfer or adjust the society for it to happen on a mass scale, then I want that to happen. This is weird. It's strange for me to swan around the place. Kind of, I don't see the point of it. I'm old. I want to I'm going to be on the rocking chair, have a bit of wood in the fire, lead a humble existence. I don't need to go on crazy cruises or this and that, or that's gaudy, right? I don't need that. I just want to see my grandchildren and have them in a comfortable environment and a country for them to live in. That's all I want at that age, right? A bit of gravitas, right? That's really, for myself even, I think that's has more gravitas than, the ostentatious materialism and sort of nihilistic materialism, I think. Sort of self-absorbed stuff. But I'll finish now, but just to say, I feel like that about my kids and my grandkids, but I feel like that about Shannon and whatever the lad's name was in Burr. I think it was Burr. Or any other young Irish couple who are staying together. God bless them if they're single and broken apart as well. That's very unfortunate. And I sympathize with them as well. But particularly for the ones who are, at least one of them is working, let's say, and they are staying together. They're trying to make it work. They're trying to keep their marriage together and do everything that's necessary to be. And also they might just be naturally very good in love with each other, and they're raising this kid, and they're not scumbags on one end of the economic hierarchy where they're parasites from the top, and they're not necessarily just permanent lump and prole sort of negative social habits at the bottom either. They're just really, really good building block people of a society, people who would help you if you needed it. They're sound, and they don't want to rob anyone. They don't want to go Tony Soprano mode and figure out loads of ways to get rich and extract resources like all these gambins and stuff. They just want to have enough, and the fact that they can't have enough breaks my heart. And I don't know those people, and yet it matters to me. And that's what I find weird about a lot of the boomers, is that how does it not matter to you about this couple in Offaly, let's say, with they're raising their young kid and they're worried about where they're going to live with a 2-3 week old baby? That doesn't get at you. That doesn't fire you up and make you see Clonmel and fire you up and see 600,000 people come into the country in 3 years, and that doesn't fire you up. How does that not happen, right? And that doesn't happen for the strangers. The strangers, I get totally fired up like I know them, right? Irish people, my own compatriots, people who I recognize and empathize with more directly. But for a lot of these boomers, it doesn't even occur for their own flesh and blood, right? So not only will they not do it for their compatriots, for people who are their surrogate children in a way, they're not my children, but they're some young Irish children. They could be mine, but even for the direct ones, they go, well, he's an Australian. I'm sure he went to college. He's fine. Or oh yeah, he's over there in Athlone in a flat. But sure, I only got an orange. Like it, to me, you should be totally activated and looking at this situation, and not just be the 76% in the polls. You should be out and out talking about it. So anyway, maybe I'm just I don't know, maybe I'm just rambling, but it's like people need to come out and talk about it. I'll give you another, and it needs to be radical as well, I'll be honest. Like I saw, maybe I'm all, like in 2018, I was talking about the asylum industry and all this, and I think I was pretty spot on the money there, right? With all that stuff back then. And now it's sort of like, not to brag, but it's like, this is bragging, but like the rest of the world is sort of catching up very slowly, like wiping the sleep out of their eyes 6, 7, 8, whatever years later. And I'm kind of going, that's nice and all, but then I was in 2024 in 2018, and it's like now in 2024 I feel like I'm in 2032, so in my mind I'm just like, oh, come on, just stop with this. Like I'll give you an example, and it's very good, fair play to him. Aidan Mullins, I think his name Adrian or Aidan Mullins, former Sinn Féin, left the party this morning because he's against their immigration policy. He doesn't think they're pushing back on immigration, and fair play to him. He did an interview with Elaine Mullally, who's very good, formerly Independent Ireland, realised they were full of shit and left, to her credit. And she is a Laois local native, and so is he. So I think she talked with him, and I congratulate him for doing what he's doing, but you know, he was caveating a lot. Again, he's a boomer and he's a mainstream politician, I suppose, or whatever. But he was saying, "Oh well, we don't want, you know, there are bad elements who are racist out there, and you know, we've got to help people. You know, we have." He was kind of saying, "Oh, we have to look after Irish people who are being ignored." He was giving the national talking points, credit to him, but sort of caveating it with like, "Well, we also want to, you know, we want to help people. We want to be humanitarian. We want to help people." He's sort of like middle of the roading it, because that's like compared to 99% of people, he's sticking his head out there, sticking his neck out there. I get that, but that's still just. It's like, how are you talking still about humanitarian and you know, we need humanitarian concerns. We can help people, but to a point and all that. No, we can't help anyone. All we can help is Irish people. I'm sorry, right? All we need to do is help Irish people. This girl Shannon and her fella in Offaly with their kid, and any more of them, and any others who want to get together. If you give them the right incentive, maybe there'd be more people willing to get together and form. Hey, what's wrong with having a house? Mom can stay at home if she wants to. And you can have a house that's comfortable and safe. And all you have to do for that is get married and have a couple of kids. If you do that, then you're like, economically, it's like the door with the tiger or not, right? It's much easier. Of course, they'd be queuing up. They'd be like, do you know what? I could be a degenerate, like out clubbing until I'm like 36 or whatever, getting like, you know, whatever. Or I could have a beautiful home that I'm working on and fixing up a little bit more all the time, but the basis of it is good at the age of like 25, and have two beautiful kids. And then by the time you're 40, the kids are like teenagers and you have your whole life back. It's a much better life path. You know, we could offer that to them. But we're not. I don't know. I'm sort of rambling, to be honest. I even just kind of lost my train of thought. What was I saying? It's like something a stoner would say. Luckily, I'm not one. Yeah, maybe I've just kind of said everything I need to say. 666 viewers, lads. Something going on. I don't know. I was talking about boomers and how they're not really pushed, and how. Oh yeah, sorry, I'm back. I totally lost what I was. The point. The Sinn Féin guy, right? My point is these caveats about, oh, we can still be humanitarian towards others and all this. Like, what are you talking about? Again, I respect the guy. Congratulations for doing what he's doing. I support him, right? Brilliant. But just like, what are you talking about? Like, maybe you're giving rhetoric just to cover yourself or whatever. Stop covering yourself. We all need to stop covering ourselves, right? And what are you covering yourself for? Covering what? I'm not the one who brought 600,000 people in. Oh, there's elements out there who would be genuinely racist or whatever. Listen, there's 600,000 people brought into the country in the last 3 years. Stop talking about racism, right? I don't give a fuck about that. I don't care about it. Not interested in it, right? It's just not relevant. We can still help people. There's still, you know, we're still help. Here's the thing about that, right? If you're bringing in 200,000 people a year, you're going to be a minority in like within the next decade, right? And in many places we already are. What are you talking about? We can be humanitarian. We can still help people. Who's we, right? Because if we're 30% of the country before long or whatever, right? And your kid is in a classroom and there's a classroom of 20 people that literally the only Irish person in it or whatever, right? Then what we are talking? Who's the we? Because we is the boomers again. We is a bunch of boomers with their troker box saying we. Okay, yeah, there's a we there, but there's no we now, right? The we is out the window. So it's like talking about helping people and we can be good. And that, sorry, but it's another thing about the boomers is because they're so well off, they sort of have this flippant attitude to these notions. Whereas it's like, well, actually, if you were working in Costa Coffee in Athlone, trying to afford a place to live and you're 26 and all this kind of stuff, right? You know, maybe you wouldn't be saying, oh, well, we have to help the poor creators out there in the world or whatever. Well, do you know what? Your attitude might change if you were working in Costa Coffee in Athlone at 26, trying to figure out how you're going to have a life, right? Your sort of flippant attitude might change pretty quickly. And that's who we should be empathizing with, is the people at the worst end of it, right? Our Irish people at the worst end of it. But yeah, it's this kind of thing. If we can help, but just we need to draw the line somewhere or whatever. It's like, no, the line was 10 years ago, right? We need radical action now, and no caveats, no bullshit. what was the other thing he said? There's something else in particular. I don't know what it was. Sorry, it was earlier. I was listening to it, but it's like, it's just like there's no time for that. Like, I'll welcome defectors from Sinn Féin. It's great and all that, and fair play to him for it and all, etc. But just like, it's like they're in a different universe. Even the ones who are sort of on the path a bit, like, who are you covering from? Yeah, you're trying not to get in trouble or something, but like, I wouldn't want to not be in trouble. Like, I wouldn't want this state of things now. I wouldn't want to be in a situation where I can say I'm not in trouble. I'm not putting myself in the crosshairs of some sort of regime slap on the wrist or whatever. Like, you ought to be. You know what I mean? You ought to be. And especially if you're a political figure like him who's out there anyway. If look, you're talking to Elaine Mullally anyway. You're out there anyway. Just get up to speed on it all. And he's talking about how it's Georgian and Albanians and they're not actually from safe countries of origin, or they are from safe countries of origin. Again, it's like, I was talking about that 6-7 years ago, like, and what I want to talk about is I want to speed things up a little bit, lads, because we don't, like I said, with the numbers, we don't have the time. We really don't have the time. So he was kind of like interested in the idea of potentially disavowing people who are too far or are going too far, allegedly, and talking about how we can still help people, but to a more limited extent or something. We can't help anyone. We're the victims. We need help. Irish people need help. That's all I want, right? If I lived in a utopia in Ireland, then I would say, let's send money and aid to people in need abroad. When we're at parties, we'll get together and we'll sort of lord it around with each other that we put something in the box, right? Because we're all very good. We'll show each other how good we are by putting funds together to send to Africa or whatever, or you name it, right? And we can all feel great in the future when we have a utopia. But that's a long time away, right? Right now we need mass deportations. We need special laws, rights and privileges for Irish people. And a change in politics. All the scumbags and the gone beans out. Just like out. And prosecution of a lot of people as well. Just a complete revolutionary change, basically. And someone might say that's ridiculous or whatever. I would say my answer to that would be to say, okay, it's ridiculous, cool. Bring in another 200,000 people so next year. Okay, that's not ridiculous. What I'm saying is ridiculous. You go ahead and bring in another, what would that be? That would be 1 million people in the next 5 years, right? Bring in another 1 million people on top of everything as it is. Bring in another 1 million people in the next 5 years, because that's not ridiculous. But the revolutionary change necessary to stop that, and the sort of the gusto and the commitment and the radicalism that is needed for that to happen, that's crazy. That's out there. Sorry, I'll go away and I'll let you bring in another 1 million people. Sorry, I'll leave you at it. My bad. Right? That's how it's kind of like that. Like, and they say, oh, well, we'll just bring maybe it'll happen magically. No, it won't happen magically. Maybe there'll be a big recession and it'll all cut back and we'll buy ourselves another extra decade or whatever. Maybe, but like, maybe not. People were talking about a recession 5 years ago, imminent. I don't know. So roll the dice there, see how far it gets us. So yeah, it's either going to happen by magic, it's going to happen by economic crash, which is pretty a huge indictment that we're hoping for an economic depression to get out of the situation we're in, apparently, right? But whereas I'd be like, no, how about we just engage in radical political change of mind, right? And just push and be willing to sort of sacrifice, not sacrifice ourselves, but be willing to risk a bit, that kind of way. Be willing to come out and say, look, I'm just going to tell the truth. And I'm not shilling super chats here, or support people who are, right? Or whatever, do whatever, you name it, but just do whatever to push the ball forward in some way. That's what has to happen. So when I hear the Aidan Mullins and all that, it's good, but it's like, I don't know. And the other thing too, someone might say like, oh, what, you want mass deportations and you want to like rip apart the NGO industry and really the whole media and NGO industry. I'm for free speech to some extent, but the corporate state media industry, which is a rigged entity, basically, all that totally ripped apart. And yeah, the whole NGO thing, the battle with multinationals, I don't know how that goes down. All that stuff has to happen, and it has to be led by people who know what they're talking about and aren't afraid. And it's either that or nothing. It really is, because you can't stop immigration without. It does require full spectrum revolutionary change, peaceful and legal, nothing to do with me, obviously. But you know, it does require that, because of course the moment you would try to actually full on deporting people who shouldn't be here, you would have the NGO industry and the media spinning up more Safita Halapanavers or whatever, some sort of, hysteria, because they control those levers. It's sort of like the whole thing. Of course, all the Gambins, all the profiteers. Think of how many people with decent levels of high agency have their noses inside in the snouts inside in the trough, right? Who would sort of shriek and wail if you started pulling this whole thing down. So that's what I mean by it requires full spectrum revolutionary change in a way, because there is no, like, put it this way, if I was in government tomorrow, had full control, and I started unwinding all of this, basically all these goblins would start popping up out of the woodwork. NGOs, Gambins, multinationals, they would go in, they would come for my head, right? And that's how it is. Like, that's it, not saying me, the government, some nationalist government wants to do that, they would be attacked from all sides. So you would need to sort of root out all of this rot, or almost just demolish the whole thing and rebuild. I'm rambling now, but what I'm saying is this goes much deeper than kind of saying, oh, like, these Georgians come from a safe country of origin. I think we need to be nice to people, but we just need to wind it back a bit or whatever. And it's kind of gone a bit mad. It's like, it's not just the migration; it's the governmental system, the industrial system, the multinational corporations, the banking sector, the financial sector. All, like, the whole thing, top to bottom, is all rotten and interrelated on this stuff. The economic model, even just the property boom of up to 2008. There was huge migration in 2006-7 as well. This is actually the second peak of that type of cycle. So this isn't the first time at the rodeo. So it's like, actually, yeah, the whole dynamic of the state, how it's run, who runs it, who has control, in what interests does it serve, and all that. Those all need to come out. And again, you come back to someone who says, well, that's too much, that's crazy. Well, okay, I return to bring in 1 million people in the next 5 years, so carry on with the trajectory. Because no matter how crazy, deep, and radical revolutionary change is as a concept and a proposition, it can't be more crazy than the alternative, which is the status quo, surely, right? And it almost seems at this point like it's like the two are just sort of, it's like a locked in fate, destiny, where it's like, yeah, those are sort of the only two things. I'm not against moderate, incremental narrative changes and little tweaks of government or getting in a candidate here and there. It's good, but just ultimately, and I mean that word very deliberately, like, in the ultimate, like, the sort of, when you take it to its logical conclusion, it does need this radical reform. Maybe reform is a better word than revolution. Radical reform or nothing. That's the time that we have available to us, and that's the depth of the problem. Dictates that it must be as is or radical reform. It's sort of almost locked in as, like, being that way. And I think people have to sort of make this choice of, like, well, what side do you support? You don't have to go out publicly and announcing yourself and all this, but just at least in your own mind, when you think about it. And more people have to be told this, that, like, you either get on board with radical reform because the problems run really deep, and you reject the whole thing, basically, that undergirds this calamity that's going on right now, because we didn't get here by accident. You either reject all that comes with it, all the profiteering, the whole system, or you sort of just say maybe we just become this agglomeration economy of 20 million Indians or whatever, and maybe it'll be like a rundown version of Singapore, sort of like a shitty version of Singapore, and maybe I'll just sort of tuck myself in under a canopy somewhere there and just kind of exist, within it, or my grandchildren will or whatever. Like maybe being a minority isn't so bad. Maybe like my grandchildren being homeless will be sort of quirky, let's say, or whatever. I don't know. It's up to you, I suppose. But anyway, I went from like a coherent, discussion of the numbers into like an absolute like pulpit rant. So there you go. Anyway, I'll read. There's some super chats there. I'll read and wrap it up for the night, everybody. So first we have Triumph of Baru 1014. Lovely. Gives 20. Thank you, and says, I'm so blind. I'm getting blind, I think. Tigani begging. I don't know. I think he means gypsies or Romani folks. Begging literally in any town that has a main street that can be accessed by means of transport. A well-documented problem in Romania and Bulgaria has become our problem in less than a few short decades in living memory. Oh yeah, I know. Well, personally, in my view, here's my view on Roma gypsies, right? Is that they are. It's the last of my whiskey, it's gone. My personal view on Roma gypsies is that not only are they not bad, they're the best people in the whole world. And obviously, any country would be delighted to have not just some of them, but as many as possible. You need to pump them into your streets and your country, and that's obvious. I basically take the regime line that they are no different to anybody else at best. Maybe I'm over egging the pudding to say they're the best people, but definitely there's no way of distinguishing them from an average Irish person. There is no way to distinguish them, besides their cultural differences and stuff. But in terms of a rating, to say who are sort of more of a positive benefit to be around you, to be in your community and all of that, to me, I'd say I couldn't discern a difference between the average Irish person and a bunch of Roma gypsies. I couldn't discern in terms of the quality that they bring to the table or potential risks or hazards or anything. Couldn't see it. And that's what I take as the regime view and the regime mandated view, that sort of and also that if there was any difference, let's say, that you could point to about Roma gypsies, whether in education or employment or crime rates or anything, even if you could show me a statistic that it's different, more negatively skewed for them, then that would have to be due to discrimination, the fact that they're actually discriminated against. So the people that perhaps if they were robbing people and occupying their streets and all that kind of stuff and doing like bad things, the people I would blame for that are the people who they rob. The people who they rob are the ones who cause them to rob, because they discriminate against them and thus increase the propensity of these negative social traits and attributes, such as crime and theft, etc. And the people who are robbed are at fault. So that's my view, and it just so happens that I agree with the regime, the media, etc., education system, HR departments, and the rest of it. I happen to just agree with that view, and I think you should believe that too. I think we should all believe that, because we're all good citizens. So thanks for the super chat. Finola Mercu 5 super sticker. Thank you very much, Finola. James 2 says there are 1.9 billion. Apparently, Pajeets is the word for Indians. I don't know if it's a slur or not a slur. If it's a slur, I disavow, and if it's not, I don't know. I am on YouTube. I don't know how whatever. Anyway, so yeah, there's 1.9 billion Indians in the world. I didn't know that. I know there's more Indians than Chinese now. They became the biggest population in the world in the past few years. But a lot of Indians, and it's becoming a big thing. Canada, Ireland, it's blown up in Ireland. If you're not familiar, loads of Indians in Ireland in the last few years. So isn't that wonderful? A country of 1.7 or 8 or whatever it is billion people, 9 maybe, not far off 2 billion people, are able to come at liberty to sort of colonize Ireland and ethnically integrate with each other. And plenty of them are rich from India, of course. All you need is one tiny fingernail worth of people from India who are rich. Like one sliver of the Indian population being rich and with money to burn is like what, I don't know, 10 times the population of Ireland or whatever. And they can all come here and work with each other, buy up a few properties, network with each other, and just completely colonize the space they're in. It's like, this is like an Irish person, a bunch of Irish people moving to some tiny island like Cape Clear or something like that, and sort of working with each other to sort of corner the place. That's the scale of difference, really. Like, but anyway, and that's the thing. By the way, to be obvious, I mean, I don't know if I say it enough, but I don't have an issue with. I'm very interested in all the different people and cultures of the world, and I don't sort of recoil at a person because of where they're from or who they are, whatever. It's a cliche to say that, but I mean that. You know, but fact is, they're a lot of them will move here and sort of ethnically, this kind of cartel stuff, like, right? Where same with Chinese buyers and all this, they'll work together, take over little industries, parts of the property market, and all that, and live with each other, speak with language to each other, live in their own kind of cloistered world, and operate as a network. And Irish people then can't be a network, even though there's 2 billion nearly of them and barely any of us. Anyway, thank you for that. So how are we? No comment. And 2, thank you very much. And so Patricius gives 24, thank you kindly, and says, this must be raised clearly and robustly with every candidate at our doorsteps in the next general election, along with one clear ask: a firm cap on foreign percentage of the population, no vote otherwise. Yeah, like Keith Wood said recently on his Twitter, the idea of mass deportations, or you could call it repatriation, remigration, whatever you want to call it, it's not a big deal. I said this on Twitter, you might have seen it already, it's just a comment I made, but I'll repeat it here, that like, I've known a lot of people, or not a lot, but I've known enough people who've been deported from Australia. I remember I was like 19 or something, working in a cafe, and there was a girl or woman working there. She was probably in her late 20s, and she was working this cafe because she said she had just arrived back in Ireland. She didn't intend to work in the cafe too long. It was just to get back on her feet, and because she had, up until that point, had a whole other life in Australia. She'd been living there for years, with her fella. But she left Australia to go on holiday to New Zealand or something like that, hoping she could she didn't have the right visa to actually be in Australia in the first place. And she thought she could leave and come back and sort of get away with it. But they ended up picking up on her, and they basically nabbed her and deported her and said, yeah, there you go, you're out. You don't have your visa. You're not getting one. And so she just had to basically pack all her things, her kind of life she had there, and come home. Her and her fella, they both did. And yeah, obviously not delighted about it, but she didn't say, oh, they are evil. I was like Anne Frank on the plane coming back or whatever. Or, it's the greatest tragedy and let's play it up in the media and, whatever, sob stories. No, it was like, it didn't come up for her or for me. It's just like, I mean, it didn't occur to me to say, oh, how could they do that to you? No, like, I mean, it's their country. They have their visa rules and whatever. Like, you don't have a right to be there. It's a privilege to be there. And at any moment they want, they could just pull the plug. Lots of people in China famously had in the last decade or so, which is a method I favor, I think, which is being nudged out. So, like I said a while ago, you don't have licenses renewed, you get visited, you get sort of cut out from access to services and stuff like that. And eventually you tap, you know what I mean? You just tap. If you're stubborn at the start, you'll eventually tap. You just go. And I wouldn't do that for every foreigner or anything, but do it for loads. Like most of the 600,000 people, let's say, who came here in the last 3 years, that's an easy one. And then go from there. Lots of people who just were like living in China and they were like, yeah, they started sort of turning the heat up a little bit. And, I don't think they wanted a lot of foreigners to leave or whatever. So, just came home. And it's like, some Indian who immigrated to Ireland 3 years ago, it's not, Schindler's List or whatever to just be like pull the plug and have them go. Like, they have a home. They can just go home to India, their town, their city, wherever they're from, their whole family, people, everything, streets, everything they're familiar with that they grew up with is right there. Whereas the NGOs would like to have it that if you had them leave, it would be some grave crime that's unimaginable. No, it isn't. They have a home. They probably go there every couple of years on a visit. Even it's just bizarre the fact that like the media and NGOs and the regime has created this overly dramatic narrative on repatriation. It happens all the time. Kazakhstan, Bhutan famously sort of deported a lot of Nepalese who they didn't want there or whatever. You've loads of cases. They're different. I don't necessarily subscribe to all of those, but like Pakistan deported lots of people. It happens all the time. It's just whatever, you know what I mean? You just like, so long as you have a home to go to, like, as in you are actually from somewhere else, then you just go home. And that's the beauty of it. You can just go home. Like, whereas an Irish person, I can't leave Ireland to go home, back home. This is the home. So that's why it's justified, like, because this is my home. Whereas someone who moved to Ireland from India 5 years ago, but they can always go home to India and it'll be there for them. Whereas if too many of your Indian people come here, it's not, Ireland isn't here for me. So it's like, I just don't see the big deal. Like if an Irish person, if a buddy of mine went to Australia for 5 years and they said, yeah, I was there and I kind of had some of the visas I needed, but they kind of just started getting cold feet on me. And I don't know, I went to the office and I couldn't get anything. They kind of hinted at me that I kind of just have to go, and now I can't get a new bank card. And I think they just want me to go. They've as much as said it. So I can't live here. I'm just going to go home now. I wouldn't go, oh my gosh, this is the end of the world. You just go, okay. I mean, you were in a foreign country, like, so it's up to them. I don't know. Sucks for you, maybe, type of thing. At best, like maybe just like, oh, that's a bit of a dose. But sure, at least you had a country to come home to anyway. So now you're here. That's that. That's what matters, is that the country to go home to exists. So thank you. And Ed the Statesman, howdy bud. 5 and says Varadkar was smarter than Harris and had some equivocation about his statements. Harris absolutely believes his statements, is likely autistic. I don't know what he is. It's probably the filthiest student union class suck-up rat you'll ever meet. You grow up in school, you have a class of 30 people. There's 2 people who are just born Schleveens, like total, like they will say anything to teacher to get in, to get in some advancement or whatever, or power over the other students. Those little worms exist, like, and they just get elevated up through the system. It's going to hire like a natural selection of the rattiest among you become the spokespeople and the so-called leaders. But I agree. I'm of the belief that I've always thought that Leo Varadkar, I could sit down and have a conversation with him, and sort of he might have said, like, he's devious and a politician and all that, but I always thought he was sort of intelligent and could easily speak, could easily take, like, I always imagined he'd probably know our position or my position well. Like, he actually, if I said, can you state my opinion, he'd probably know it, probably plays both sides of the fence. He used to be conservative, used to be pro-life, has made anti-immigration comments back in the day and then sold his soul or whatever, because that's the gig. But yeah, probably a reasonably intelligent person. Whereas Harris is just, I don't know, sad. It's like those, oh my God, what a complete ashling, like journalist people who turned into government advisors. He got a bunch of those women and they all told him to scowl and act like Benito Mussolini or something, like a skinny, dorky, weird, gay version of Benito Mussolini. And apparently that would look cool. if he furrowed his eyebrows and talks like a little worm. But I don't really get it. But apparently that's his whole gig basically. So he doesn't really say a whole lot interesting or novel. But I think it's all about just furrowing your brow, and then the newspapers will gleefully or dutifully. Harris, they all see this as well. They'll say Harris insists. Taoiseach Harris claims immigration out of control. You'll get stuff like the media is so snaky. They'll do stuff like that and put a big furrowed brow like he's really serious on the headline. I've seen a few of those. So obviously the low information voter sees that and says, "Oh, finally someone who is really ignorant." So maybe some of these boomers sees that and goes, "Yeah, good. Someone's standing up to the PC mob gone mad," and they just don't know that. Yeah, that's not real, But yeah, I agree with you on Harris and Varadkar. I'd take Varadkar over Harris just as a human being. I think. Armchair Limerick Nationalist 10 gives 10. Thank you very much, and says, "Send us a link to your laptop fund. The upcoming elections will be the future of this nation." Yeah, I'm thinking I need my laptop for that. All right, it's one of those things that I get super chats and stuff, and a little super chat thing will drop into my bank account once in a while. There's sometimes I've gotten decent, or not super chats, but donations and stuff. And I don't know where to draw the line between, obviously, what's for the laptop and what isn't, kind of thing. I don't know. Maybe I should do a link. Yeah, if I do a dedicated link, I feel weird doing a GoFundMe for a laptop, that kind of way as well. But what I'll do is, yeah, I'll send you online there. I'll send you some sort of link or another. Maybe I'll do an informal, low key, behind the scenes fundraiser. Maybe do it that way. But anyway, thanks, and I will do. So. How are we again with 2? Thanks. Says great stuff, Gerald. Keep it lit. Natural law, not maritime law is what I'm going for. So free man of the ocean. But anyway, so thanks for joining me. I just wanted to go through those immigration numbers, and I wanted to hammer home the idea that 200, it's a bit back of the envelope. But 200,000 people have come here. Split the difference. Could be a little bit more, could be a little bit less. 200,000 is kind of the real number, if we're being real, if we're being totally honest. 200,000 a year on year, 600,000, and no sign of it abating. So people need to kind of understand that. Oh, and also Irish people pouring out the back door as well at the same time. So, I mean, that's the TLDR. So anyway, I'll leave it there. Thanks very much for joining me. Take care of yourselves. Ihawa. See you.